What I love about it is that, I get to be creative and express my passion and express what I've learned over the years and over the world and put it into one plate for the customers. So even one banh mi that might be, takes 3 minutes to put together, is probably maybe about, up to a week of preparation just to get that stage.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. There are few things more satisfying than a humble sandwich. There are many iterations all over the globe of something special between two pieces of bread or wedged into a bun. The banh mi is adored the world over, and thanks to the wonderful way our society has been built in Australia, with migrants arriving from all over the globe, the banh mi has become an icon down under that rivals the prized sausage sanger. But what does it take to make a great banh mi? DJ Lee is the owner of Le Vietnam in Perth, Western Australia. DJ, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you, Anthony?
Good. You've got a fascinating name, DJ Lee, and you happen to be a DJ. But banh mi is where your heart is at the moment. What is it about banh mi that captured you?
It's something that I grew up eating as a child. Like, it's been around for a long time. And it's something I grew eating, and I just fell in love with it as I traveled the world.
Well, tell us a little bit about that, because you've created a bit of a name for yourself over in the West with what you're doing. But you weren't always going to be in the food industry. How did it all happen?
So, it's all started straight after high school. So went into uni, studied, double major degree, graduated, got into a 9-to-5 job, and stuck in there for about 2-3 years and realized I didn't enjoy myself there. Sitting in front of the computer for 10 hours a day, the days just dragged on. So I pretty much started to take a break, and I said, in order to have a happy life, you got to enjoy what you do on a regular basis. So I traveled until I found myself. DJ'd a bit, built a really good reputation on YouTube. So they flew me to different cities to play and headline shows and stuff like that. At first I started, I turned it into a game where each city I went to, I had to just try banh mi, just for the sake of it, like whether it was Sydney, Melbourne to Bali, Vietnam, Tokyo, Korea, Barcelona, Paris, Rome, Venice. I traveled like quite a bit, just doing shows and stuff like that. And when I landed in Paris, that's when it blew me away of different varieties of banh mi's, and I was like, man, like Perth has never had this type of banh mi before. Let's bring it all back to Perth and give it a shot.
Wow. Well, take us on that global trip. What's some of the experiences that you had with banh mi while you were traveling?
So when I was traveling, let's just say when I was on my way to Barcelona, I'll give the organizers a heads up. I'll go, okay, when we land and, obviously I'm going to be a bit hungry. Can you pick some of your favorite banh mi spots to duck into? And they've got friends that are owners of certain shops and stuff like that. And they'll go, yeah, we'll come to this place and check it out. And because we're friends and stuff, or they're friends with the chefs and that, we'll just talk and go, oh yeah, how did you do this and how did you do that? And at that time, I didn't have an idea of anything about banh mi or opening a store or anything like that. I just gathered knowledge from what they told me on tips and tricks, like, when I cook this duck, I tend to do it like this. When I cook this lamb shoulder, I do it like that. And I just noted it down in my notepad just so that I had it. So when I come back to Perth, I can cook it at home or whatever. And then, as I traveled, the more cities I went to, the more different banh mi's I tried, the more excited I got and more curious I got. So, and next thing you know, I just wanted to dig in deeper on the knowledge of banh mi. So landing back in Paris, that's where the French is the ultimate influence of the baguette, the pâté, the mayo, and that's where it originated from. So I had to learn how to make the pâté there, and I spent quite a few months in Paris, and following the guys that did the banh mi's over there. So there was 3 stores that I learned from, and they all had their own little variations, but at the same time there was a lot of crossovers, and a lot of those crossovers that I learned were never done in Perth. And a lot of Perth places that when they did it, as me growing up, you think that eating your banh mi growing up like that that's the right way, but then you realize that the authenticity, when you travel the world and you learn bits and pieces, you're like, wow, Perth has. There's a few things missing that Perth needs to know about. So I took it all back, and here we are, like 8 years on, and we're still pumping it out.
Can you tell us about some of the examples of how different the banh mi's have been, whether it's Tokyo or Seoul or Barcelona? What's some of the really different ones that you've experienced? In Tokyo, the karagi chicken banh mi, it's like a fried chicken nuggets with a Kewpie mayo, furikake sprinkled on top, and the richness of the fried chicken, the mayo, it balances out with the pickled carrots and with the bread. Every single city, every single country had their own different variations of bread. But when you want to come down to the real correct bread, like we went back to Vietnam to learn how to make the bread as well. And it's, how would I say that? It's almost like what Anthony Bourdain mentioned. It's a symphony in the sandwich. Like everything just balances quite well together, especially that light, airy, fluffy bread that vessels the whole condiments together. Also in Seoul, I had kimchi is a really big thing in Korea. They tend to put kimchi on a lot of things. So there was a bulgogi pork with kimchi banh mi that we had. That was blown away, and when we went, it was in wintertime, so having the spiciness that would just warm you up from the inside, that was incredible. And people don't realize that like the weather also affects your taste buds as well. Like if it's really cold, you want to have something spicy to warm it up, and it just tastes 10 times better. Is there any others that you can tell us about that are pretty wild and a really strange version of banh mi that surprised you?
Yeah, in Paris I had the lobster and prawn banh mi. It was a lobster and prawn tater.
Wow.
Yeah, that was blown away. So it was confit in butter, and it had chunks of lobster tail, prawn, and it was nice and served cold. And I was very fortunate to get into the process of doing that. So I featured the lobster and prawn banh mi here at Le Vietnam quite a few times. It's been one of our biggest hits, and because people know that I order bulk loads of lobster tail in, I do a live demonstration on Instagram, and also let people show, hey man, this is what I'm doing right now. So you can make it at home if you want, or you can come through and grab lobster and prawn banh mi.
You mentioned you went to Vietnam to learn how to make the right bread. Take us back there. Do you have any stories from that experience?
Yeah, so we went about 3-4 years ago, me and my wife, and we traveled from north to the middle to the, we traveled from the south to the middle to the north, and right up to the north of Sapa as well, so up into the mountains. And throughout each city, we also developed a game where we'll try different banh mi's at each stop. In Vietnam, it's very convenient. You can find banh mi in every single corner of the city. You can, if you can't find it, you ask locals and they'll direct you to the spot. We smashed over about 40 different banh mi's to try them, and it's and documented each one. It's funny because I really wanted to educate the crowd that I do see people on online and stuff like that, where they'll say, it's not a banh mi without the pickle, it's not a banh mi without the coriander, or there's not a banh mi without the pate. Truthfully, it is a banh mi regardless, because in different cities, different suburbs, they all have their own different variations. Some places don't even have the pickle. Some places don't even use the pate. Like you just say, for example, in Hoi An, the one of the most famous cities in Vietnam, where Anthony Bourdain tried the banh mi, they specialize in grilled meats. So there's no cold cuts or anything like that. Whereas, in the southern side, it's they've got the cold cuts as well as the northern side. They've got different cold cuts because there's more French influence up on the northern end, and they've got the pate and stuff like that up there as well. And so that's the beauty of the banh mi. Banh mi translates the bread, and it's basically whatever you want to put into the bread roll is considered a banh mi. And going back into the Hoi An stage, where Anthony Bourdain had. So it's called Banh Mi Phuong, very, very worldwide well known. And we spoke to them about, on their take and showed us how Anthony Bourdain had his banh mi. So we documented that. Then they, we built a really good relationship where they took us to their bakery as well. They go, this is where we bake our bread and, wake up early in the morning, come tomorrow and we'll show you the whole process. And it's next level. So what we learned is they were willing to share because we just had the passion of banh mi. Like both sides had the passion of, serving banh mi to the crowd. So they just wanted to share their stories and we share our stories. And it was very a next level connection.
You mentioned of the influence of France and the time that you spent there. What did you take away from that time? Do you have any stories of that period and what impact it had?
Yeah, in France. So I remember before the show that night, I was sitting in the hotel. I was just resting up for the show. And at that point, I was feeling quite a bit lonely. One is because a lot of I've been away from Perth for a few months already. Talking to family and friends on a regular was very rare because I'll send them messages like on Facebook or Instagram, and you won't get a reply for another 12 hours because when it's daytime in France, it's the opposite in Perth. So and friends would be the same. When the first message would be, "Hey Lee, are you back in Perth yet?" I'm like, that's usually one of the messages, and I'm like, oh man, I won't be back for another couple of weeks, So around that time, I was, things were building up where it was just getting quite lonely. The only friends I had were the organizers and stuff like that. Once I get on to do the show and then finish the show, and then I'll get ready to pack my bags and off to the next city. So at that breaking point in Paris is when I sat down. I was like, man, I really want to go back to Perth and just remain close to family. So even though there were times when I was living the high of my life, it's the back scenes. It seems it was the lows of my life as well. So yeah, simply I just missed having family dinner at the table at 6:30 every day. The whole family's at the table together and having dinner together. And I think that's one of the most things that I missed out on. And so I said, after all this tour's finished, I'm just going to head back home and try and find something where I'll remain in Perth. And that's how this cafe popped up.
Well, going from working in an office job and then DJing globally to opening a cafe selling banh mi, it's a pretty wild ride. What was it like trying to find a venue and sort of dive into an industry that you hadn't really been in?
It's it's a bit scary at the start. When after I took a break from the 9-to-5 job, when you wake up every day and you struggle to get out of bed, not wanting to go to work, is because you don't really enjoy your work, and that's not, to me, that wasn't my happy life, and I had to dig deep to find what actually makes me happy. And I remember during uni days, I would work in a cafe and I really enjoyed it. One thing is because you meet really awesome people on a regular, so you just have little light conversations in between. But at the same time, when you're in the rush, the busy rush creates a time where you just forget about the time. It just flies by so quickly. So even though the work seems like you've only been doing for 30 minutes, you look back at the time, you realize it's been 5 hours, has flown by so quickly. Whereas, vice versa on an office, when I was sitting at the office, I remember looking at the clock, it was 11:20, and I'm doing so much work and I'm smashing it all out and doing this, and I'm like, yeah, I got so much work done, it must be almost home time. And I look back at the clock and it's only 7 minutes has gone past. So that's when it kind of kicked in. I was like, I really need to, get into something that I really enjoy. And nowadays, like I realize looking back, even though we're coming up to 8 years, I still love waking up, getting out of bed, getting into the cafe, getting all pumped. And I think passion really drives behind the scene of to make a business really succeed.
Building a business that has succeeded like yours is pretty tough work. Well, take us back to the early days. How did you go about finding a venue, creating a menu, and creating these recipes?
So finding a venue was by chance. I remember coming back to Perth, and after the whole traveling, I found a venue within about maybe 4 weeks. It was just by luck. The venue I wanted to be, within the city, to have some sort of exposed to a lot of foot traffic as well, because that's what I feared. Because being in the middle of nowhere, you could be a bit scary where there's no foot traffic, so you get less customers than that. So I was very lucky to find a spot that popped up for sale at the right time. And then, so once I got into that, writing down the menu, making sure what needs to be in, what needs to be out, and what's going to work in that. And at the start, you have no idea what you're doing. And there was a lot of test trials and errors and stuff like that before we opened. And once we opened, what you tested, it was just by luck that things seemed to work out. And there are, certain things that we put on the menu that wasn't selling very well, so we took it off the menu. And, if we took things off the menu, the same thing on the other menu would just boost in sales. So it was a lot of trials and errors and stuff like that. And next thing you know, it's, even now I'm still trialing and error, and it's just like an ongoing basis. Like, things are unpredictable nowadays,
What's been some of the real successes? Is there a couple of banh mi that you can tell us about that you've created that, sort of epitomise your celebration of a banh mi?
So I'd say there'll be, let's go. There'll be 3 that I can break it down with. Okay, so the first one is the ultimate. Our number 1 top seller is the original 3-meat combination. So this is the one that I learned back in Paris. It's got the French pâté. It's got the different cold cuts of pork. It's got the slice of pork belly, the Vietnamese ham, the Vietnamese nem in there as well. So there's 3 different textures of pork in that one, and they all have a different distinctive taste from each other. Like, one's got a nice sweet charred taste, one's got a nice fatty pork belly with a star anise, and then the other one is the garlicky Vietnamese ham in that one. Topped it off with the eggy butter mayo that we churn. So we churn our own butter as well as bake our own bread. So that's all in the. So the bread is supposed to be airy and fluffy on the inside and crispy on the outside, and that's the traditional way of having a banh mi. We do our own pickling as well. So it's a 4-week pickle, and it's traditionally it's done 4 weeks. So it's left there to pickle in its own juices. And, I find that that's one thing that was lacking in Perth, is that a lot of places just only pickle for a couple of hours and then they're ready to go for the day. Whereas, we learned the traditional way of pickling it right, and it balances out. You've got the sweetness from the carrot, but the crunch and then the zanginess. And, top it up with the fresh cucumbers, the coriander, and, if you really want to amp it up a little, just put pieces of chili in there. And there's a lot of things happening in one bite. And that's my one that I tend to, really love to, I wouldn't say boast about, but I put a lot of pride in that one. It's got us quite far with a lot of write-ups in feature articles and stuff like that on that one. So that's that one. The second one that was recently featured in the Qantas magazine was our crispy roast pork. So I brought this one to another level. So we roast our own roast pork, but also what I've done is I take off the skin off the pork, and then I let it to air dry overnight, and then I cut it into small pieces, and then I'll deep fry it. So it becomes almost like an airy chicharron. So that one is that when customers eat it, they take it away, they eat it 3 or 4 days, it's bound to be nice and crispy and airy and still got that crunchy, porky taste to it. Because last thing, one of the things that we experimented from the very beginning is that if you just do it the normal traditional way, the pork crackles can get rubbery, get a bit chewy, when customers take away and have it like, a few hours later. Pork crackle is it's a very, how do I say, it can be a very 50-50 on point things where if you have a nice crispy crunch, but then, in 10 minutes later, it might go down to a bit of a floppy, soggy, rubbery texture as well. So we did it in a way where it made it next level, and it got us a really cool mention in the Qantas magazine. So I was pretty proud of that. And then the last one is one of my all-time favorites would be the lamb shank. So I love eating lamb shanks on its own, especially when it falls off the bone. And this one I learned back in Barcelona. So I've cooked it in a way where it's confit with the garlic butter, let it roast for 12 hours straight, and then it just falls off the bone, and then I'll put a nice salsa on top, like a chimichurri. And that one is by far one of our biggest sellers as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the business has been going for about 8 years now. What sort of impact has it had on the community? Do you have any sort of customer feedback stories that you can share?
Yeah, we've got a decent clientele with our Banh Mi. So we on an average we get about maybe 500 to 550 people through the doors each day. There's been times where we'll shoot up to 700 in a day. Our record is 1,100, just over 1,100, and that's when we were featured on TV of some sort over the weekend. And it does get pretty full on. Like, even we open the doors at 10 a.m. and there will be times where the queue is already queuing before we open. So it's pretty cool that the clientele here that we've got is phenomenal. Like the Perth locals have supported us so much from where we are today, especially the Vietnamese community. They are our bread and butter. They supported us from day one and have told their friends, and it's just built up where they've just come in, and everyone that comes through, we've treated them like family. Like I'm usually at the front counter, so I tend to take on everyone's orders, but at the same time, you recognize a lot of regulars, so you kind of know what they're going to order already. And we've got a full team here that will churn out the banh mi's within minutes. So it's all made fresh to order. The turnaround times very, very quickly, and the line moves very quickly. So it's really awesome that the clientele here has pulled us through post-COVID and during lockdown and stuff like that as well. So we're very fortunate to have stuff like that.
You mentioned how much you missed your family, and that was one of the triggers to come back to Perth, and also sort of banh mi and the role of food, in your family when you were young. What does your family think of what you've created?
They're very proud at what I've done. It's really crazy that they're one of the first believers of believing in me to do what I wanted to do out of my comfort zone. A lot of it's been stereotyped that a lot of Vietnamese and Asian parents are always wanting their kids to become a doctor and become a lawyer, and I just happened to become a DJ, and then just jumped into another zone of hospitality, which is and without them believing in me, that was the ultimate push. So when before all this happened, they no one knew where it would take off, whether it was going to succeed, and the last thing you want is for it to fail. Like, that's the worst thing that for any business to open and not work out. But we've been very fortunate to keep pushing and make it work. And I remember even starting, and a lot of my old generation parents' friends were, when we were telling the idea, we're going to just open banh mi and just purely just open banh mi only, a lot of the old generations thought I was a bit crazy. They said, you're not going to survive, because no one has ever just opened just a purely banh mi store only. A lot of places where they open, they'll sell like 1,000 things under the sun. They'll sell banh mi, they'll sell burgers, hot dogs, sushi, noodles, rice, and then sandwiches and whatever into one spot. And they think that that's the model to survive, because if somebody comes in and doesn't want to buy me, at least they've got a hot dog, at least they've got chips, at least they've got sushi. But they thought I was pretty crazy to just go and very brave to just go full on, have a menu of just purely just banh mi only. And yeah, so now they're the same people are asking me for recipes on how to make banh mi as well. So it's pretty cool.
Western Australia's had a relatively different experience of COVID to the vast majority of Australia. But what's it been like for you and your business?
It's been okay. We've went through a 2-month lockdown through the first COVID, and during that time I took advantage to stay home. Spend a lot of time in the kitchen just mucking around because when you wake up, you pretty much have nothing to do besides TV and just cooking as well. So did a lot of experiment, took some time off, and as the city got safer, that's when we decided to reopen, and we didn't know whether it was going to be busy or not. And at first, it was ghost town. The city was barely had anyone because a lot of offices were pushed to work from home. But then as we start to let people know that we are open, people made their way out of their homes, drive into the city to grab a couple of banh mis and grab even more through the support. They, rather than just getting 1 or 2, they bought 5 to 8 banh mis for their family, for their neighbors and stuff. One is purely for support. And secondly, because that relationship that we've got with the customers, they kind of, want to see businesses survive. So they kind of, put their intake in, and it's kind of helped us grow. And as they introduce their neighbors and their friends to banh mi, and then if they get blown away, they'll be like, "Oh, where'd you get this from?" I definitely have to come down and share it with my friends, and that circle builds even bigger. So and we've been very fortunate of that. I think it's because we've been here for quite some time, so that clientele has been pretty decent. Whereas I've seen a lot of businesses that open around near COVID time and they haven't reopened since, which is very unfortunate.
Has the creation of this amazing business changed you?
I think to me, honestly, I don't think it's changed me at all. I think I've just become more humbler than I have ever been. Regardless of how much success or how much write-ups we get, people still see me and I want them to see me as a regular guy where I just, work harder than the employees here as well. And I still, treat this as my first week of opening, and still making sure everything is done perfectly. I think it has probably not changed me as a person, but probably made me wiser in making more decisions for the business itself. So maybe throughout the 8 years, maybe I'm a bit smarter, but for myself as a person, I don't think it's changed me. I'm still, the same guy where I just wear, your $4 t-shirts. I'm still if you see me on the street, you probably think I'm just a hobo that yeah, I don't really wear much name brands or anything like that. So you don't, I don't think it hasn't changed me much at all.
What do you love about what you do?
Oh, I think what I love is meeting regulars and new faces on a regular basis. So, the people that come in, it's firstly overwhelming that they come through in the first place for your banh mi. So, a lot of people do travel quite a distance just to come here. And for regulars, just catching up with them as a friend or family, whether they've had a child recently or they've had a birthday over the weekend, and you're just getting an idea of what they do, and then remembering the convo that you had until their next visit. And that's what blows people away as well. You wouldn't believe how many people I remember their names and orders and stuff like that, and whether it's been months or years that they come through, and I still somehow I can remember their names and orders, and they get blown away by that. So that's one of the things that I love about the front side. But the back side is I love the flexibility in the menu. So we've got about 30 different types of banh mis to choose from on a daily basis, and the menu is always changing on we depends on what's seasonal, what's available. Sometimes in the daytime, I get a call from one of our suppliers and go, hey, we've got some we've got some lamb shanks on special today, and I got it freshly in. Do you want to grab some in? And I'll order 100 of those straight in, and I'll get that within a few hours. And once we close the doors, I will stay behind for a bit and prep it all up and get it all ready for the next day. And what I love about it is that I get to be creative and express my passion and express what I've learned over the years and over the world, and put into one plate for the customers. So even one banh mi that might be takes 3 minutes to put together is probably maybe about up to a week of preparation just to get that stage. There's been times where I create your vegan mock meats and stuff like that, where I do it all in-house, and it takes about a week to prepare. So there's a process where you got to freeze it, then the next day you got to defrost it, squeeze out all the water, and then you got to freeze it again. You got to do it about 3 times, and that takes up to a week. And then once the final product comes out, it becomes such a realistic meaty texture that even meat eaters were saying, I think you gave me the meat one. And I'm like, no, that's 100% vegan. I just made it into like a very full-on textured meat. And it scares vegans away, but they love it as well, So, and I think that in the all terms is the creativeness that I get to experience behind the scenes is one of the things I truly, truly love and excited about the business, because I can take it to another level and push it to another level and blow customers away. And when they get blown away and they tell me their feedback, they go, man, that one that I had the other day was by far the best that I've had, and so on and so. And then it makes everything so satisfying.
Well, what you've created over there in the West is extraordinary, and it's been an honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear a bit of your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Anthony.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.